Most gang leaders hide in the shadows. Maurice Boucher held press conferences. Most outlaws avoid attention. Maurice Boucher craved it, courted it, weaponized it. Raised in the rough, working-class streets of Montreal, he was just another small-time thug. Hot-tempered, violent, with nothing to his name. But when the Hells Angels came calling, something inside him snapped into place. He didn't just join the most powerful biker gang in the world. He remade it into a military machine, one that would declare open war on an entire province. Ruthless, calculating, and always 3 moves ahead, he earned the name Mom, not because he was soft, but because he mothered the Quebec Hells Angels into the most profitable criminal empire in Canadian history. But here's the question that haunts this story. How does a street fighter from Hochelaga-Maisonneuve rise from construction sites to ordering assassinations of prison guards with the precision of a CEO? How does a kingpin, untouchable and feared by all, end up dying alone in a maximum security cell? This is the story of Maurice Boucher, the biker who turned organized crime into organized warfare, and the hubris that guaranteed his fall. But this story doesn't begin with blood in the streets. It begins on June 21st, 1953, in a cramped apartment in Hochelaga-Maisonneuve, one of Montreal's toughest working-class neighborhoods. Maurice Boucher was born into a world where respect wasn't given. It was beaten into you, or out of you. Small for his age, skinny, with delicate features that seemed almost fragile, but inside him, violence was already brewing. The other kids sensed weakness. They came for him. Maurice fought back, not with hesitation, not with mercy. He fought with a rage that didn't know when to stop. Other boys fought until someone gave up. Maurice fought until someone bled. By 13, he'd been expelled from 2 schools. By 15, juvenile detention for assault. His father tried to straighten him out with fists, with a belt, with the back of his hand. All it taught Maurice was one lesson: violence was currency, the universal language. By 21, he was going nowhere. Construction jobs he took when he felt like it. 3 assault arrests, petty theft, possession. Just another small-time thug, headed for an early grave or a long sentence. Then, in 1974, he found the Popeyes Motorcycle Club, and everything changed. The Popeyes gave Maurice his initiation the traditional way. Hauled him into the basement, beat him for 20 minutes straight. Fists, boots, pool cues. Maurice took it, didn't cry out, didn't beg. When they finally stopped, blood running from his nose and mouth, he stood up, spit a tooth onto the concrete floor, and asked if that was all they had. The Popeyes didn't just respect him, they loved him instantly. Within a year, he was a full member. Within 3 years, he was running operations. The Popeyes moved drugs, marijuana, cocaine, through Montreal's bars and strip clubs, but they were disorganized. They'd pull a job, celebrate too hard, spend everything, then scramble for the next score. Maurice saw it immediately: the inefficiency, the wasted money, the weak links. He started keeping records. Who owed what? Who could be trusted? Which cops could be bought? He didn't brag, he didn't boast. He quietly made the Popeyes leaner, sharper, more profitable. And when profits rise, respect follows. But Maurice didn't want to be the smartest man in a small gang. He didn't want local fame. He wanted the patch that commanded fear across continents. He wanted the Hells Angels. December 5th, 1977, the Popeyes officially became a chapter of the Hells Angels Motorcycle Club. The Death Heads patch was stitched onto Maurice Boucher's back. He was 24 years old. This wasn't just joining a gang. This was entering a global criminal network, chapters in 59 countries, connections to cartels and mafias on every continent. The Hells Angels weren't a club. They were a multinational criminal corporation disguised as bikers. Maurice took to it like he'd been born for it. He took over a strip club in East Montreal, turning it into a front for drug operations and money laundering. He recruited carefully, bringing in guys who were hungry, loyal, and smart enough to follow orders. He didn't want cowboys, he wanted soldiers. But by 1982, Maurice's rise hit a wall. Arrested for sexual assault, a 16-year-old girl, a hotel room. He was sentenced to 40 months in prison. Most people would see prison as the end. Maurice saw it as graduate school. Inside Bordeaux prison, Maurice didn't waste time. He made alliances with Italian mafia figures, with traffickers who controlled the drug flow in and out of the walls, with corrupt guards who knew which doors to leave unlocked. He watched them, studied them, learned how money moved through a system designed to stop it, how power survived confinement. He read constantly: military history, business strategy, biographies of dictators and CEOs. He wasn't trying to get educated, he was studying power, how it's taken, how it's held, how it's projected. He trained obsessively, day after day, added 30 pounds of muscle to his frame. The skinny kid from Hochelaga was gone. In his place stood a man who looked like he could break you in half, and he networked, built a database in his head. Who was connected to what organization, who could be trusted, who needed to be eliminated. When Maurice walked out in 1986, he wasn't the same man. He'd gone in as a thug. He came out as a strategist. and he came out with a plan. The early 1990s were quiet, almost calm. The Hells Angels controlled most of the drug trade. Money flowed. No one challenged the order. No one rocked the boat. Then in 1994, the rock machine emerged. Bikers who refused to bow to Hells Angels' dominance began carving out territory, cutting into Angels' profits. Maurice Boucher, now president of the Elite Nomads chapter, wanted war. Montreal would suffer more bombings than some active war zones. What followed became known as the Quebec Biker War, the deadliest gang conflict in Canadian history. Between 1994 and 2002, more than 160 people were murdered. Dozens more were injured. Car bombs, drive-by shootings, executions in broad daylight. Montreal didn't feel like a city anymore. It felt like a battlefield. But Maurice didn't just want to win. He wanted to send a message, one that would echo for decades. A message to street dealers, to rival gangs, to police, to politicians. Challenge the Hells Angels and you die. Not just you, everyone you love. In March 1995, an 11-year-old boy named Daniel Desrochers was playing in a park in Montreal's East End. A car bomb meant for a rock machine member detonated nearby. Shrapnel tore through the playground. Daniel died 4 days later. The city froze. The public was horrified. The media swarmed. Politicians promised action. Maurice was unmoved. Collateral damage, he reportedly said. This is war, and in war, there are casualties, but his most brazen move was still ahead. In 1997, Maurice Boucher decided to do something no crime boss in Canada had ever dared. He decided to go to war with the justice system itself. June 26, 1997, 4:30 p.m., Diane Lavigne, a prison guard at Bordeaux Prison, finished her shift and walked to her car. She was 42 years old, a mother of two, 20 years on the job. A motorcycle pulled up alongside her vehicle as she waited at a stoplight. The passenger pulled out a .357 Magnum, fired twice through the driver's side window. Both shots hit Lavigne in the head. She died instantly. 5 months later, September 8th, Pierre Rondeau, another prison guard, was driving home. Same setup, motorcycle, 2 men, Magnum revolver, 2 shots. Rondeau didn't even make it to the ambulance. These weren't random killings. They were strategic. Maurice Boucher had ordered the hits personally. His message to the Quebec justice system: nobody is safe. Not cops, not judges, not prosecutors, and definitely not prison guards. But Maurice miscalculated. Killing rival gang members, even children caught in crossfire, that was gang business. The public was horrified but ultimately desensitized. Killing government employees, representatives of the state, that was different. That was a declaration of war against Canada itself. The government responded with overwhelming force. Operation Springtime, 2001. Hundreds of officers, wiretaps, surveillance, informants. They weren't just after Maurice Boucher. They were coming for the entire Hells Angels infrastructure in Quebec. For 3 years, Maurice evaded them, changed phones weekly, communicated through intermediaries, used coded language. He was paranoid, rightfully so, trusting only his innermost circle. Then, in November 2000, Stéphane Gaudas-Gagné, a Hells Angels hitman, flipped. He began cooperating with prosecutors, revealing conversations where Maurice had personally ordered the prison guard assassinations. Gagné had intimate knowledge of the organization's structure. Maurice was arrested on November 28, 2000, charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of the prison guards. The trial became a media circus. Maurice showed up every day in expensive suits, smiling, confident, treating it like a performance. He waved to supporters in the gallery, chatted with his lawyers, acted like the whole thing was beneath him. A first trial in 1998 had ended in acquittal. Prosecutors didn't have enough evidence. But this time, with Gagné's testimony and hundreds of hours of wiretaps, the case was airtight. On May 5th, 2002, the jury returned. Guilty, 2 counts of first-degree murder. Maurice Boucher was sentenced to life in prison, with no possibility of parole for 25 years. He wouldn't even be able to apply for release until he was 78 years old. As guards led him away, Maurice turned, looked directly at the prosecutors, and smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a forced one, a genuine, almost amused smile, like he just heard the punchline to a joke only he understood. Maurice Mom Boucher spent the next 20 years in Canada's harshest prisons, Port Cartier, maximum security, later transferred to Ontario, a move to cut him off from the Hells Angels he had built. Inside, Maurice adapted. He always did. Worked out religiously, read constantly, followed news about the organization he'd built into a criminal empire slowly crumbling under sustained police pressure. By 2009, Operation Charcuterie struck. 156 Hells Angels arrested. The Nomads chapter destroyed. The drug networks he had established dismantled. The new leadership tried to rebuild, but they lacked his vision, his ruthlessness, his control, and slowly, the world forgot about him. The media moved on. The Quebec Biker War became history. The man who had once commanded an army, who had turned Montreal into a battlefield, became just another old man in a cell. July 12th, 2022, a Tuesday morning at Port Cartier Maximum Security Prison, prison. Corrections officers found Maurice Boucher unresponsive in his cell. He was 69 years old. Emergency medical staff tried to revive him, but Maurice was already gone. Natural causes, most likely a heart attack. The autopsy was quick, no foul play. Just an old criminal dying the way most old criminals die, alone, behind bars. The Hells Angels released no official statement. His family held a private funeral, no media circus. The man who'd craved attention his entire life died quietly, with barely a whisper from the world he'd terrorized. Maurice Boucher's legacy is written in blood across Montreal's history. He turned the Hells Angels into a criminal empire that generated an estimated $1 billion in drug profits. He pioneered tactics others would imitate: compartmentalized operations, strategic violence designed to maximize psychological impact. But he also destroyed lives without hesitation. The 160 people killed weren't just statistics. They were sons, daughters, fathers, mothers. Daniel Desrochers was 11 years old. Diane Levine and Pierre Rondeau were civil servants doing their jobs. They didn't choose to be part of Maurice's war. He chose for them. What Maurice understood was that power isn't about strength. It's about perception. About making people believe you're willing to go further than they are, to cross lines they won't cross. And Maurice was always willing to go further. But in the end, all that power amounted to nothing. He died in a cell, his empire dismantled, his influence is gone. The man who'd built himself into a myth ended as all men end, forgotten by most, mourned by few. Maurice Boucher wanted to be remembered as a king. History will remember him as a killer who mistook fear for respect, violence for strength, and control for legacy. He lived by the patch, and he died wearing nothing but prison orange. If you found Maurice Boucher's story compelling, hit that like button and share this with anyone fascinated by true crime and the psychology of power. Subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most notorious criminals. Now I want to know, if you were on that jury, knowing what he did to an 11-year-old child, to prison guards just doing their jobs, to an entire city, would life in prison be enough, or should the punishment have gone further? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching.